Hello, Ray Moran with the V20. Excited to say I'm here today with Dr. Stephen Msomi, PhD. Stephen is the founder of Kabusha Advisory, a merger and acquisition firm. He's governor of SAFM, South African Institute of Financial Markets, and author of the book South African Crypto Assets, a ESG lecturer and practitioner, and exciting for me, he's also an Ironman triathlete and ultramarathoner, and we're going to talk about that. Stephen, welcome. We're excited to have you today.
Ray, it's an absolute pleasure. Let me thank you for two main things. Number one, your invite for this session. I think it's going to be quite fascinating to go through it. And number two, the openness in terms of our discussions leading up to this session. I think we're going to have a good one. Thanks for having me again.
Of course, our pleasure. Stephen, the first question, I know there are differing levels of awareness of ESG, environmental, social, and governance around the world, perhaps more so in Europe, perhaps less so in my country, the United States, for differing reasons. How's awareness of ESG on the African continent and locally?
Ray, thanks for that question. I think it's a topical question. If I may, just before I get into the African story in terms of ESG, I could just touch on a few elements just around Europe and the US. If you look into the US, one of the elements that become clear is sometimes what I would call a little bit of politics that tends to stifle or maybe raise head around the issues of ESG. But overall, if you think about it in terms of technology and other things, there is a wider belief that ESG or these elements are real, and the nature, for example, needs to be taken care of. But of course, the issue of politics and many other things tend to muddy the water a little bit. Of course, if you look at Europe, for example, the UK, maybe Netherlands and places like this, we're going to go through some numbers. They seem to be a little bit ahead in terms of how they've warmed up to these elements. And Africa, it's a very fascinating story for two main reasons. The first one is that notwithstanding the fact that the contribution in terms of greenhouse effect from African continent is estimated to be about 2-3% thereabouts, which is quite small. The interesting element is that the effect, or rather let's call it the negative effect of these elements in the African continent seems to can affect Africa much more than the other mature or developed economies. But maybe to come to your question very quickly, Ray, there is awareness of ESG in Africa. In fact, if you look into funding models and funding platforms and instruments, finance leads Africa in terms of ESG awareness. You will know, Ray, as the entire world, that Africa needs just over 574 billion in terms of doing a nice chip on the sustainable development goals in terms of achieving those by 2030. Africa, as we all know, notwithstanding our resources, we don't have that type of capital. So we look for internal and external resources to fund these things to get away with poverty and all sorts of things, ills that we have in the continent. So the point I'm trying to make is that finance will lead the agenda in terms of Africa warming up, or rather sharpening its inclination into the ESG. But overall, the picture is almost like it is elsewhere in the world. Africa is aware of ESG and the need to take care of these elements in what we do as business people or as society at large.
Well, that's really interesting, Stephen. Thank you. The International Valuation Standards Council had a recent survey on ESG where they identified three issues that were key to advancing ESG. The first one was standardization of metrics. The second was more professional development and training. And the third, engagement with stakeholders. True also in Africa, Stephen?
Yes, indeed. If one looks, for example, at the main challenge, which is standardization of ESG elements, it is a major issue, and what it does is that it makes the ESG elements to be more like a tick box or a marketing or a PR exercise. So the intention is to be able to infuse these elements in their relative magnitude or maybe effect in each of your evaluation tools, if I may put it that way. So as we stand, there's just so much left. We'll go through the numbers as we go along. Because the study that you are referring to is a good one, 2024 study, 542 respondents over 80 countries, and 28% in the US in terms of respondents, another 20%, 28 in Europe. Africa does feature at around 8%, which is number 4 in terms of the numbers of respondents. So it's a study that is well presented in terms of its findings and clarity in which they have put together, the reports of that study. But you are correct; those three elements are the main consideration going forward in terms of ESG standardization, which is a main problem. And also training, it is a real big issue because, ESG just came strengthened quite a lot around COVID and immediately after that. So we still don't have enough resources. We still don't have enough platforms, but there are many entities that we might speak about that are doing a great deal of work in terms of consolidating that.
That's really interesting, Stephen. In a past V20 conference we had in India 2 years ago, we met with university students and endless questions about ESG and what our profession and the global perspectives and economies were, in terms of doing something about it. So tremendous interest amongst younger students these days. Very good to see. But my next question, Stephen, I've often seen it much easier to quantify and include the environmental aspect in evaluations than social and governance portions of ESG. Has that been your experience as well?
Indeed. So there's two schools of thought around that, Ray. There's one school of thought that says the governance issue is possibly the easier one. Number 2, environment, and then the last one, which for the reasons we are going to speak a little bit, the societal one being the very complex one, because you're dealing with human beings. They change all the time. I was very interested, maybe I can share this with you, Ray. There's something called the happiness index, a global happiness index. It comes on a yearly basis. It just rates countries according to how happy people are in those countries. So it's a report that's been refined over years. So with a lot of resources, statisticians, econometrics, and all these things, modeling these feelings, it is difficult, but it is possible. I am therefore hopeful, Ray, that over time we will find the social aspect a little bit easier. In fact, when ESG matures, there will be data that can now be put into this regression analysis and all sorts of things, and we can rely on projecting that data going forward. But yes, you are correct. The social part is difficult. The environment is difficult. A little bit easier, even though it's still complex, because you've got science that leads how warm the environment is getting, how the sea levels are going up, what are the effects of that, and you can model that backwards in terms of the effects. But of course, it's overall ESG is a very complicated matter, notwithstanding the politicization of this matter that you've just spoken about.
Yeah, I could not agree more, but I have to ask this sports question, Stephen. I know you've done Ironman South Africa. I know you've done the Marathon des Sades, the 250-kilometer ultra marathon through the Saharan desert over 6 or 7 days, and carrying your own nutrition and hydration, I believe. Do you have any favorite racing experiences you'd like to share with the audience?
Yes, Rita, thanks for that question. I hope it's okay with you. I know we did not discuss this, but it's so fascinating to be asked this question by a seasoned athlete himself. Ray, I was so fascinated when I looked into your bio, both professionally and in sports. You've achieved many things. The Marathon des Sables is a complicated race. It takes a lot of effort just before getting into the starting lineup. So you travel for 3 days just to get there to the starting lineup. But what fascinates me, Ray, is ability of human beings to share, because when you get there, you've got now a small backpack. It's got all your supplies. There's no hotel. There's no shop around the corner. It's you and the race, which is the desert, and a little bit of supplies that you've got in your backpack. So what then happens, Ray, is that from time to time, you realize you don't have enough wet wipes, you don't have this, and you rely on other people in your tent. We've become so close people in terms of sharing the resources, but overall, it's one for the bucket list for those that want to try the race. I really recommend it.
Thank you for that, Stephen. And I agree, there's a bond amongst endurance athletes around the world where we will do anything to help other competitors, and it's
Indeed.
all about the finishing.
Indeed.
Absolutely.
Indeed.
Stephen, I'm very excited for the V20 conference in Cape Town. Any final thoughts you'd like to share with the audience?
Yes, Ray, the issue of valuation, which I'm hoping to speak about maybe at a technical level in the conference. In the main, you want to look into your cash flows, as you know, project them forward. So everything is into the future. But what ESG is doing, you're starting to look into those cash flows and look at the specific effects of different elements into how they move, those forecasts going forward. But as you know, the discounted cash flow is the one that maybe we'll spend a little bit of time more so around the issue of ESG. So I'm really looking forward to this little gig that's coming, and to welcome other delegates from all around the world. I think it will be a good one to have and to share.
I'm also looking forward, and I will take you up one of these days. You and I will run the Cape Town Marathon together, Stephen. That would be a lot of fun.
That will be great, Ray. Thank you so much for having me.
Okay. Thank you so much, Stephen. This has been great.